Hello, everyone. This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I am Narain Arul Raja, the founder and one of the co-hosts of this podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy, www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I'm excited to talk to two renowned ophthalmologists, actually father and son, Dr. Joshua Cohen and Dr. Richard Cohen. They are the founders and owners of Cohen Laser and Vision Center. And the topic we're going to explore today is called Keeping It in the Family, Navigating Private Practice in the Age of Private Equity. So, Doctors Cohen, welcome to the podcast. How are you both doing?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If it's okay, I'm going to call you by your first name. So I'm going to call you Joshua, and Dr. Cohen, I'm going to call you Richard. So I'll be directing questions at you. Feel free to jump in, interject me or interject each other, and let's have a fun conversation. So maybe I'll start with the wiser doctor here. I mean, Dr. Cohen.
We all know who that is. Yeah.
Richard. So, Richard, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, who are you? What got you into ophthalmology? And kind of give us also the history of your practice. How did you end up creating it?
Sure. So originally when I was in medical school, I was going to join my father, who is a family practice, and I was going to do internal medicine. So when I started my internal medicine residency, though, I did not like it. I felt like I wasn't really helping people, and I was just a pill pusher. And I thought back as to what I liked in medical school, and I said, oh, I think I'll go in ophthalmology. So I applied for ophthalmology, and it was probably the best decision that I made besides marrying my wife. But anyway, so, and I loved ophthalmology. And afterwards, I decided to specialize in cornea and external disease. So I did a fellowship in Boston. And then we moved down to Florida, and I was with a group for 6 years as their cornea specialist. And then after 6 years, I decided to go out on my own. And my wife and I opened up our own practice in 1991, solo practice. And we were the first people to do LASIK in Palm Beach County. So we had to step up. And that was a gamble to go ahead and buy your own laser, because we were competing against corporate laser entities. But we decided to do that, and it worked out very well for us. So we started doing LASIK as well as cornea and ophthalmology, general ophthalmology. And then in 2018, Josh joined us. So it's been, so I fast forwarded there about 30 years. So I hope you don't mind.
Absolutely. And I guess you are the lucky one, right? Your dad was not as lucky because you didn't join him. So
Right. Oh, speaking of which, so my father, I mean, interrupt you, Josh.
No, go ahead.
So my father was very disappointed that I didn't join him and go into internal medicine. And, but he realizes that I made the better decision going to ophthalmology.
That's awesome. That's great. Josh, tell me about yourself. I mean, I guess my first inclination or question is like, I bet your dad had something to do with you getting into ophthalmology. So tell us the story.
It's possible there was a marginal influence there, but no, yeah, definitely for sure. I think when people ask me why I did ophthalmology, I think that the natural response is that my father's an ophthalmologist. I grew up knowing what he did day in, day out, not the details, but enough. I knew that he was available on weekends and seeing me perform or go to tennis tournaments. And we still had a great relationship growing up, and I think that accessibility was certainly something that my brother and I recognized, which isn't always the case with parents in medicine. And plus, I think having gone through undergraduate training with a kind of an eye towards ophthalmology or medicine in the future. It wasn't something I committed to right off the jump. I studied environmental science in college and thought about, maybe doing something outside of medicine, like consulting or education and teaching. I actually did that for a couple of years at Pinecrest, my alma mater. Taught high school English and math and chemistry and ethics for a couple of years before starting medical school. And then once I realized that I wanted to, continue my own education further, I thought medicine would be a good fit. And I kept an open mind even still. But then having gone through the, clinical rotations and realizing what attracted me most towards medicine, which is kind of building long-term relationships with patients, but still having the, I guess, personal discipline to develop surgical skills. That was really something that was fascinating to me. And being able to sit down during surgeries was awesome. Instead of being like in an extended, thoracic procedure, those are all the things that kind of drew me to the field. And then having the exposure kind of sealed the deal. And then the opportunity to ultimately match in ophthalmology and then join my dad's practice was just a dream come true. And for the last 5 years, it's been wonderful, growing the practice together and, kind of, working towards building the next stage in the practice has been a challenge and an enjoyable experience all in all.
Thank you. That's awesome. I think this is a rare situation, right? Richard, looking at you, I know you are really happy, right? And being happy with what you're doing after 35 years is not easy. Forget about being successful, but so what is your secret? Like, I mean, I have to ask this because, we all, people who don't have the experience you have, sometimes, we wake up not as excited as you are. Like, I mean, this is recordings at 4:30 and you are happy as happy can be and getting along with your son, and son loves being here. So it's interesting. It's kind of awe-inspiring. So just kind of wanting to know, what is your secret?
I mean, I don't know if there's really a secret. I think that coming to work and just seeing the patients so happy, the way after surgery, the way they're seeing after LASIK or cataract surgery is just great. It really keeps me going, I have to say. And it's very rewarding. And I didn't get that in internal medicine. So sight is such a precious gift that we have. And restoring someone's sight is it's a real blessing that we have this skill and this ability to give back to the patients. And then, of course, working with Josh is a dream come true. We get along great. It's just a pleasure having him in the practice. He certainly has a different point of view than I do, and sometimes we have a little bit of discussion about that. But usually, I have to learn to see his point of view a little more often because it's different than mine. But he's the new generation, and he'll be taken over when I retire. So it's going to be his practice. So it's great.
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, as the junior partner, the new kid on the block, so to speak, you have to have deference to people who've done this for years and there's no substitute for 30 years of on the ground experience. And especially when you're managing your own practice, it's not just the medical side, which is challenging enough, particularly coming out of residency or fellowship. It's definitely a lot to be on your own, so to speak. But then when you're learning the management side and how to deal with personnel and dealing with insurance and, dealing with the day-to-day, details and almost minutia of managing a practice and keeping it solvent, is a whole different skill set. So, I think that there are perspectives that I have as far as, where I think the practice could go, where the future of medicine at large might be headed, but we still have to kind of keep it grounded, so to speak. So I think the give and take in both of our experiences has worked well. And, it's a day-to-day challenge though, too. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, patients ask, like, what's it like working with your dad? And it's been great. I mean, all in all, it's been great. I mean, of course, we have our moments like any father-son or, parent-child relationship, you're gonna run into each other at times and not always see eye to eye. But, those are few and far between all in all. And I think that, being able to kind of work out those challenges together has been a really fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the good, the bad, the uglies, and probably more the bad and the ugly. I can think of three situations. One is I have a daughter. She's 20. She's in university. I think she would rather do something on her own because she's like, oh, I need my space. I need to make
Sure.
my own mistakes. I don't want somebody telling me stuff all the time because I just can't keep my mouth shut because I'm like, you're going down the wrong road. But anyway, so I mean, I'm still learning. I'm not as experienced as you are, Richard, but but then I also have seen two particular examples. I'm thinking of two doctors. Dad, it was the practice manager. Sorry, the doc. The wife was the practice manager, and then of course the son or daughter comes in, and it's kind of a disaster. And in both cases, the parents see the kid as a kid. I mean, so even the kid could be 50 years old, but still it's a kid, and we know better, and we know. So I want to ask Richard. I don't want to put you on the spot, but knowing what you know, and having done this, and the key metric to me is happiness, right? You guys are happy. So what are some of the lessons you would impart on others, perhaps in your shoes? Perhaps definitely that father parent child relationship, but could be any other kind of relationship.
Yeah, well, I think basically Josh had the skill set that he could have done whatever he wanted to do when he finished college. He had so many talents. So we didn't push him into medicine. He just sort of gravitated towards medicine, and we let him do what he wanted to do, just like our other son, Zach. We definitely didn't push him in any direction. And then when he got to medical school, I was encouraging Josh to look at plastic surgery, radiology, dermatology, other specialties besides ophthalmology to keep an open mind. And then when he joined the practice, I think the first year I was a lot more hands-on than I think I pretty much was hands-on a lot. I was looking over his shoulder a lot, I was seeing patients with him. But then afterwards, I just said, you know what? Josh is going to have to learn on his own. And he knows that I'm here if he needs help. And that's basically how we do it now.
Yeah, I think that, what I was getting to about getting out of training and being on your own, I think that, I took full advantage of having my father's expertise in and around the clinic, even in the operating room. I think my first cataract case was like an extra cap, like one of the only ones I've done. But my first cataract case was a very complex one with a psychiatric patient who had to be basically sedated, and it was a whole ordeal. So, sometimes you don't expect things to present themselves in that way, but just as the scheduling allowed it, that was really the first time. By the time I got credentialed at the surgery centers, that was my first case. And again, even in residency and fellowships, those are the types of surgeries that you do, but you don't always necessarily do day in, day out. It's not your standard cataract. So I brought him in, and I was like, would you mind being there for the first cases? And I think that it was nice to know that I had someone who was there to support me. And I think a lot of people, when they join, either they go out on their own right off the bat, or they join a single specialty or multi-specialty group. You don't always. So not everyone maybe feels perfectly comfortable asking the senior partners to come in and help them. And I know that sometimes you need that. And I think that having the humility, even though you're a doctor and you're credentialed and you're licensed and you're ready to be autonomous, I think that having that support was really critical for me, because it allowed me to explore other things in the practice that I wanted to kind of do on my own, like eyelid surgery or MIGS, things that my father didn't really have the experience doing and or the desire to do. So I kind of was able to bring that into the practice, irrespective of his level of comfort. But I think that knowing at the end of the day that I had the support was definitely invaluable. And I think that it's something that every junior partner, everyone who's getting up and finding their footing in medicine or any field, I think that having a mentor that is willing to kind of take some extra time to make sure that you're comfortable is a good thing, and making sure that the documentation is the way that, because there has to be some consistency. So, my eye training really wasn't from my father. I was trained by other doctors, throughout my residency and my time away from Florida. So, I think that coming back in and learning how he does things, how I do things, and blending those skill sets together is what allowed the practice to continue to thrive.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let me kind of switch gears, and I want to kind of predate the two of you working together and go back to the beginning. And of course, what do they say? Overnight success, sometimes decades in the making. So you have a practice that's an overnight success that's 35 years in the making. So looking back, what are some of the key things that you did, Richard, that you think are foundational to your success, your practice? I mean, whether it's values or key decisions you made or key things that you think will never change.
Yeah. So I think that when I first left the group practice to go out on my own, I was very fortunate that my wife could come in and really help out in the practice. And in fact, when we bought our first laser, she ran the laser with me. So it was the two of us. So she had to get trained in how to run a laser and do LASIK surgery. But I think that our philosophy was always that do what's right for the patient. So whatever it is, we have to pretend that we're the patient and do what's right and treat the patient as if we would like to be treated. And that's always been our philosophy here. It's not what's right for the practice, like how can we make the most money? It's just let's do the right thing, and patients will tell their friends, and then we'll have a very successful practice. And that's how it grew. It grew by word of mouth.
Richard, I have a question. I'm not Richard. Josh, I have a question for you.
Okay.
You have been here now how many years? 5 years? 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your dad described the core of the practice, right? Which is do right by the patient. Has that changed? Is there anything else you want to add in terms of like the keys to
I think that the
success?
I guess you can say like the spirit of the practice is, I think, unchanged. I feel like that people come in, even patients who were hesitant to see me when I first started because they've built a rapport with my father for decades. And that, of course, was something that I knew I was going to encounter. And then, as time has gone on, I think patients have kind of learned from their own experience, from times where I might see them when times where my dad's not available. And they realize that there's a lot of consistency and continuity in our medical philosophies and our interpersonal philosophies, how we treat the staff, how we both, I remember listening to my dad call his patients after every surgery. Growing up, I would hear him, in his office call patients. And that's something that I just thought everyone did. So I do that too. And every time I call my patients after surgery and they're like, hey, is this the doctor? And I'm like, yeah, it's Dr. Cohen. How's everything? How are you feeling? They're like, I'm doing fine. Like, that's so nice that you're calling. And, I think that it's that personal touch that I learned from him. And I think that it's become just a natural way for us to, present ourselves as being, I guess on the level with the patient. We want to tell it like it is. We want to do right by them. And we also want the practice to be small and intimate enough where we can maintain those relationships, like, we don't have a bunch of optometrists. We don't have a lot of other doctors on staff. We really just have the core two of us who are here, doing the day-to-day. And we're the people who the patients have come to expect to see. And I think that, there are pluses and minuses to that too. Like I think that there's a ceiling, a growth ceiling when you're trying to keep a practice more of a boutique family practice like we have. But then again, I think that, you can still find the right mix of, quote unquote, financial success and patient satisfaction quality. But it's, I think that, more or less, I think we've tried to keep things. I haven't tried to change things all that much from how my parents had set things up, years ago. With that said, though, there are definitely modernizing aspects of the practice that I've been very forceful and very aggressive in making sure that we take those necessary steps. And most of that's on the technical side, So whether it's new, diagnostic modalities, equipment that we've seen, or website design, being able to update our patient communications, with being able to have, text and communication abilities with patients. They can do online scheduling, those types of things the practice didn't really have before I got there, because it was kind of one of those things where it wasn't on my dad's radar so much. It was like, well, my patients are of a certain age. They're comfortable with where things are. But to reach the next generation, these are things that we had to do. So that's kind of been, where I've stepped in and kind of taken control of that side of things.
I just want to add, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is that our staff, we're very careful upon who we hire. And we try to hire people who are nice and are gentle and knowledgeable and have a good personality and are able to communicate with patients well. So I think, and our patients appreciate, they always comment on how nice their staff is. And I think that's very important in growing a practice too.
Yeah, let me follow up on that question about staff,
Sure.
Richard. I know you said people who are nice, who are caring. Can you elaborate on that? Like, how do you, let's say I'm an ophthalmologist listening to this and I'm like, I want your secret sauce. There's a lot of turnover. People are not committed, it's a job. I mean, I'm sure you have heard this term, silent quitting, or I don't know, whatever that term is.
Oh yeah,
right.
Or people just aren't putting their all into their
right.
Putting their all.
Exactly.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I can use right now, Josh and our office manager have been doing the hirings. But a couple of times when I've met I've met the potential employee, and almost immediately I knew that they weren't going to work out. But I let them go ahead and do the hire. And as it turned out, they didn't work out. So you can usually tell, just like, Robin is a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I met her, I could tell. She comes in, she's smiling, she's happy. She has other activities besides work. You can just tell, just on the first interview. I mean, I've interviewed hundreds of people, so I can just get a feel for it now. But basically, look, we still make mistakes. And then when we do, we try to get rid of the employee pretty quickly when things aren't working out, when they're rude to patients, when they don't know how to answer the phone correctly, when they keep patients on the phone too long, on hold. They don't greet the patient personally with a smile when they come into the office. You see this, and patients tell us. So we're very lucky that our staff now seems great.
Yeah, I think that, what I've learned in my more limited experience with hiring is that a bad employee is worse than no employee.
Right.
It's better to hold out the position than find someone that you think you need to fill, because
Marlo,
you're strained. Dad, please. Yeah, it's recorded. Because you're strained to fill a position. Whereas if you literally just diffuse the work around the other employees for a short period of time, find ways to incentivize, compensate them accordingly, to give them that extra incentive to bridge the gap and fill in, during that period of time, to buy the office some breathing room. I think that's been a lesson learned, because ultimately, when you hire someone that doesn't work out, not only do you have the onboarding, but you have all the expenses with HR, all the training. Your staff is now diverting their attention to not only their day job, but also bringing someone else up to speed. And then when you have rapid turnover, it really, it costs us double. It costs us in time and in money. And then it ends up being, more of a problem than it's worth than if we just, kept our heads down and do it. Now, that's there's limits to that too. You don't want to keep a lean skeleton crew and have everyone overworked to the bone where they feel like that they just can't find a respite and they're not being supported either. So finding that happy medium is a challenge.
Thank you, Josh. Josh, I have a question for you. We live in a world of, I guess, regulation, especially in healthcare. I would argue it's over-regulation. So how do you balance that compliance versus, innovating, growing, taking risks?
Well, I think that you have to kind of know what you don't know. And I think finding, not only support staff, but we've reached out to outside consultants at times to come in and just kind of make sure that we are within compliance. But ultimately, fortunately, a lot of the systems now and a lot of the software systems are kind of designed, at least as far as I know, they're designed to kind of keep some of those regulations and compliance standards kind of as an underpinning of the system. And that's kind of been a challenge too, is finding the right systems within ophthalmology. It's a small field. The number of ophthalmologists is just a fraction of your primary care or your GI or a lot of other specialties, even subspecialties. So finding systems that tailor to our language, our abbreviations, our workflow has been challenging. And we've tried that too. We've tried switching things up. We've gone to different EHR systems, different patient management systems, different billing systems. Some were all encompassing and some were more fractionalized. And we've actually found in our practice that actually, even though it's not perfectly integrated, finding independent silos that work optimally is better than finding a system that does everything, but just marginally okay. But our system now will automatically pretty much check to make sure that we've met certain billing criteria for MIPS and for coding, and to make sure that our reimbursements are proportionate to the services rendered. So some of those things have been helpful because you're right, keeping up with all the codes has been a real challenge. But we've had to hire a billing person, someone that we didn't have before, just to kind of help with that as the practice has grown. So we just have to make those personnel adjustments too to make sure that we're staying above board.
Thank you, Josh. Richard, I have a question for you. I know inflation is a real thing, right? Wages are up significantly over the last 2 to 3 years, and pretty much every expense is up significantly over the last few years. And I think we all notice it, especially in the last few years, more so than ever in the last 30, 40 years, at least as far as I can remember. So how are you managing this? Like, of course, you want to be profitable, you want to provide quality care. And at the same time, like, you don't want your, take home or your, profit margin, whatever you want to call it, to shrink. So how are you balancing this?
It's very difficult because I'm trying to keep the salaries down and my son is giving everyone raises. So, yeah, so we have that little issue going on.
Yeah, there's definitely give and take here, but I think that this again speaks to this generational divide, if you will, of recognizing that when you have a staff member who's been with us for 15, 16, 17 years, that like institutional memory is so valuable that even if the salaries haven't necessarily always gone up consistently, especially recently with inflation, making adjustments on the back end to try to keep our staff happy, and salary and bonuses is so essential for that, of course, that I felt like sometimes it's important to do that. But it has been a challenge, and we have actually over the last few months, at various points, made adjustments with our personal compensations to make sure that we can kind of keep things going and keep the staff well compensated, or appropriately compensated. But it is a challenge, and this kind of this is a fundamental area of concern and focus for us, is to try to make sure we have appropriate staff to keep the patient flow moving, and the patient care quality high, but without overburdening our overhead to the point where we can't keep the practice afloat.
So, right. So with that in mind, I keep having this discussion with Josh that I think we have enough people. We don't have to hire any more. And then on the other side, I say we have to cut spending. So I'm sort of like the bad guy here, because I'm always saying we don't need this now. Let's not buy this. We can put it on next year's budget. And we have this back and forth. But as Josh said, some months we just take less salary just to make sure that our staff is well compensated. But like we do things that most practices don't do. We celebrate birthdays for our staff members. We have cake, and we have a party. We have a nice year-end party where the spouses are invited, and we go. And so I think people enjoy working with us. So
Yeah, I think
it keeps people happy.
Yeah, I think we ultimately try to be, accessible to our staff, to the point where we all feel like we're friends and we're family, and I think that that's an important thing. If staff need some extra time,
Mhm.
we've had some people who were right the minute they were hired,
Right.
had to deal with personal issues, health issues, family issues.
Mhm.
And these are not the types of things that are easy to kind of give people the benefit of the doubt, especially when they're first starting with us. But sometimes we just kind of say, okay, we just got to keep our heads down, keep the
Mhm.
boat steady. And, hopefully, this person, if we think that they're able to, continue to do what they're expected to do, maybe not exactly at this time, but moving forward, if they can grow with the practice, we got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that a lot of times, if you support people when they need that support, then, you get rewarded for that, and you have people who work for you and who are loyal to the practice. And we've had people who have left the practice and then come back to the practice.
Yeah.
People who try other things because of as conflicts arise, as they always do when you're dealing with personalities. Sometimes you realize that the devil is better. But ultimately, I think that we do try to make people feel comfortable and supported, and that's kind of a quality of life thing that is really important too.
We try to make it a pleasant place to work. We we try not to criticize our staff. We're just nice to our staff. That's the main thing, I think. We treat our staff well. We don't
I
talk
love
down
that.
to them. Yeah.
Uh, this is my last question. So I'll start with Josh and I'll let Richard finish. There's a young doctor who has been in practice for a few years. He wants to go out on his own, or she, and put the shingles up, do this thing, build a practice that they
Sure.
want, the way they want it. What would you tell them? Like, based on everything Josh, what would you tell them?
Well, starting a practice from the ground up is really a challenge, and I think that that's kind of where the temptation to have the support of a larger medical management company, these private equity companies that are coming in and providing, capital, or even signing up to have people work in an employee capacity, is very tempting, I think, for people who are starting off, because it kind of takes that big capital expense and the burden of debt and the challenge of marketing and self-promotion and all that, that's a lot. So from my experience, I was extraordinarily lucky to, be the son of someone who was willing to take me on and allow me to grow alongside of him, at the expense of some, independent compensation for sure. A lot of the patients that I started off with were his own. But I think that the major issue, or one of the things that I'd recommend is someone starting off, is number one, I think taking call as an ophthalmologist at local hospitals has been really, really helpful. So I started off, I was taking call at 3 different hospitals when I first joined here. And my father's at the stage in his career where he wasn't doing that. But I think that working at those hospitals allowed me to gain relationships with doctors in the community that really helped, kind of build an independent patient base that was really, really helpful. And I think that if you're starting off, if you're moving to a new city or something that don't really have any sort of name recognition, I think that's the easiest way to do that. Just get on staff at some hospitals, and that'll really get things going for you. And then the other thing is, like Dad was saying, kind of start small. Start with just your core support, maybe one technician or one front desk, and just grow from there. You're not going to be able to buy all the equipment, all the pentacams and the eye trace and the, ancillary equipment that, we use in our practice, because they're certainly helpful, but they're not necessarily foundational to, a comprehensive eye doctor, or, even a cornea specialist or surgeon. And then, the last thing I think would be is to find opportunities to maybe take advantage of other practices, use their equipment. Maybe if you want to get into refractive surgery, see if you'll be willing to use someone else's excimer, to gain some experience, and maybe find some sort of rental agreement or something like that, so that you don't have to take on all that capital all at once. Because I think that ultimately changes your perspective on patient care. I think it's inevitable where if you're not solely, but if the constant threat of making your interest payments and your capital expenses, if they become overwhelming, then you're going to start, in some ways, cutting corners. And I think that's a dangerous thing that can happen if you're so concerned about, making money, especially right away.
Thank you, Josh. Richard, what do you want to add to that? You definitely have a few more gray
I think it depends upon the person. A lot of the residents coming out only want a 9-to-5 job. So that type of person is better to join a group or go in private equity where their hours are set. I was not that type of person. I was a hard worker, and I didn't mind working 20-hour days to build a practice. So if you're a go-getter and you're aggressive, then certainly do what Joshua suggested. You're able to make it in solo practice, but you're going to have to work your tail off. You're going to have to meet doctors. You're going to have to take ER call. You have to be available in the middle of the night for emergencies. And if you're willing to do that, then you'll be able to build a practice by yourself and be very successful at it. So it really depends upon the person's personality and how hard they want to work.
You're saying there's no shortcuts to private practice. I mean, it is going to take hard work.
There's no shortcuts to private practice.
Yeah, there isn't. I think that, again, just finding, I think that what Dad said is really true, because you kind of have to know yourself. You have to know what you're willing to take on.
Right.
You have to know what your limits are. And then you have to also, medicine is hard enough as it is. You kind of have to you always have to keep reading. And, for me to kind of stay on top of everything, I often need, personally, I need to have residents or med students or people kind of coming in to kind of keep me motivated. And that's what I brought into practice, so now we're affiliated with our local university. We got med students coming in the summer for research. We have residents at the hospitals that I rotate through. So, that's what keeps me on my toes, and I think that for Dad, he's at the stage of his career where, he's more or less set in his ways. He knows what's worked, he knows what's not. And having that kind of stability and that kind of, burgeoning mindset is a really great place for the practice, because I think it maintains continuity of care, but also moves us into the future, which is, the best thing ever. So,
right.
It's
a good combination.
We're at a really exciting place in our practice, and we think that it's definitely, it's a dream come true. And, if someone finds themselves in the position where working with their parents or working with a close family member or someone they trust inherently is willing to kind of take you under the wing, it's hard to find a better experience, than that.
Josh, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question, if you don't mind. Of course, if you don't like it, we'll edit it out. Most people don't do well when they work with family members, right? A spouse, a son. Your dad has done exceptionally well. Like, as a person, who's not your dad, you are your own person. Like, what do you think are his qualities or his habits, or whatever you want to call it, that you think makes it work? And I'm asking you because you are not him.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that you kind of have to be able to compartmentalize certain aspects of who we are as people, so as not to kind of get too enmeshed in the family dynamics at times. And I think that my dad has always done a good job of making sure that he doesn't treat me like an employee, and he doesn't treat me like a son. He treats me like a partner. And I think that has been it's been an invaluable lesson for me to know that it can be done, and that, someday, if my child wants to pursue something like this, I know that it is something that can be done. And I think that it's just his nature. He's very down to earth. He's very organized, and he's a really good doctor. So I think that, having that combination of traits is what allowed him to do what he does, and it's inspired me to recognize that, oh yeah, this formula works. So even though we do have very different personalities at times, and we have different approaches to things, both medically, clinically, and interpersonally as well. Like we talked about, our fiscal priorities sometimes do differ, but ultimately I think that, his willingness to kind of have an open ear and then say, okay, like, I see what you're saying, but we can't do that now, and sometimes I'll be like, but why? Like, I don't understand, and then you get into this natural dynamic of like, please, Dad, like, come on, like, why aren't you doing this for me? But, I think that he is able to separate that and be like, look, I am, both as your father and as your partner, this is not right for the practice now. And then ultimately, we can have a mature conversation about things and kind of figure out, well, why and why not? What will work in the future? What isn't working now? And then we can kind of make those adjustments. Like when I was pushing for, all these technological changes for the practice, I think that there was a lot of pushback, particularly from him, because he's been doing things for a long time. A lot of doctors in his generation are still on paper records. They're taking the hit because they don't want to transform their whole paradigm and how they handle their medical documentation.
Right.
But for me, coming in, it's like, no, like, I would never go back to paper records. My handwriting is so bad as it is, like, it would be a disaster in other respects. So I think that finding that balance and having someone who can accommodate things when deep down he recognizes that, yeah, this might be a growing pain for now. It might be something that he wouldn't have taken on himself. But knowing that I'm passionate about it, he'll give me the freedom and the support to do what needs to be done. And for the most part, I think we've both benefited from that, and that's kind of been, my lesson from him, and from my mom too, who still works with the practice. I think that being able to separate, the personal expectations of how parents and children are supposed to interact, or, whatever the expectations may be, and then what the practice needs as its own entity, I think it's tough for families to find that distinction, because at the end of the day, yeah, he's still my dad, and he's my dad first. And I'm his son first, but, a very close second is the fact that we're both mutual professionals. And I think that, being able to kind of, thread that needle is something that he's been doing very well, and something I respect greatly.
Thank you so much, both of you. Unless you have any final words, I want to take a minute to thank both of you and ask you, if people want to, learn more about you, follow either of you, how can they do that? We'll include all of this in the show notes.
How can I follow? I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly, you can visit our website, which is cohenlaser.com. It has kind of an overview of the services we offer and a little bit more about our personal bios. But my email is joshua@cohenlaser.com, and you certainly can reach out if you have questions about, joining a practice as a junior partner, or, navigating, going off on your own, or, joining a larger group, or, how we have handled our place in, the market, if you will, in a time where, groups and larger groups are looking to acquire and kind of, build their own portfolio of practices. We've decided to kind of keep it in the family and kind of hold that off for now, because we feel like that we can still maintain the quality of care that our patients have grown to expect. But that's a constant challenge. But yeah, I think that ultimately, we are certainly open and very transparent about, most things. So be happy to talk with people.
And my email address is bocalasik@yahoo.com. If anyone wants to email me, happy to do anything I can to help them out. I gotta say that what you're doing is very beneficial. So I appreciate this podcast, and I think a lot of ophthalmologists would appreciate this too. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much, Josh. Really enjoyed our conversation. Of course, I mean, I'm also at the end of my day, but I'm really pumped because, a good role model, perhaps for all of us, not just in ophthalmology, but in life in general. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing. And I wish you the very best of success, because I think the thing about, being an entrepreneur a doctor entrepreneur who runs a practice is, you care. It's not just a numbers. PE people, I have nothing against them, but it's just, it's a number, right? It's all math and numbers. But here, it's the patient, you care about the outcomes. These are people you have a relationship with. You're part of the community. This is who you are as a person. Of course, you have the money, numbers have to work, but at the end of the day, that's secondary. The number one thing is the people you take care of and the people you work with. So
exactly. I think, having our name, in the practice has just been, that's the inspiration. You don't want to, it's not about the ego. It's about just standing by the product, the care that you give. And, it's just been a real privilege to kind of carry on that legacy. And, I appreciate my father keeping that window open, not selling out before I joined, because there's no doubt that financially he'd probably be making a little bit more if he weren't selling to me. But at the end of the day, I think that, like you said, it's more than just the bottom line. It's about, bringing the brand, if you will, and carrying that forward, into the community and beyond. And it's a great thing that we're trying to do. And we appreciate you interviewing us as well and taking your time. So Naren, this was a real privilege. Thank you.
Can I just tell you one quick story?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we have a patient who's over 100 years old, and she was a patient of my father's. My father was in internal medicine in Virginia, and then she moved to Florida, and then I took over her ophthalmology care, and now Josh was taking care of her. So 3 generations of Dr. Cohen's have taken care of this patient. It's unbelievable.
Yep, it's true. Yeah,
she's amazing, right?
She is incredible. She's incredible. And she remembers my grandfather. She has these great anecdotes about how he used to play tennis with her husband. And it's amazing, just to kind of have that connection. So there's been a long line of Dr. Cohen's, and we hope it will continue.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshua Cohen and Dr. G. Richard Cohen, for joining us today and talking to us about keeping it in the family, navigating private practice in the age of private equity. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead. I'm your host, Naren Arulraja.